Thanks, Noel. Okay, this presentation is about the enforcement approach to licensed sites that are significant pressures on water quality. So as you know, the Water Framework Directive requires water bodies to achieve at least good status by 2027. It's implemented in 6-year cycles, and river basin management plans are developed in each. The catchments team and groundwater teams have carried out catchment characterisation using data from multiple sources and have identified groundwater and surface water bodies that are at risk of not meeting good status by 2027. They've identified significant pressures impacting on the water bodies, and some of these significant pressures are licensed sites. I'll run through the industrial and waste licenses, and Jim will explain all about the approach to urban wastewater treatment plants. So in 2018, in the second cycle River Basin Management Plan, licensed sites are identified as significant pressures. There have been some changes since then, but going into the draft third cycle River Basin Management Plan, there are currently 41 sites that are significant pressures. This equates to about 5% of the total licenses, industrial and waste licenses issued. So 31 of these are industry and 10 are waste. The waste sites are closed municipal landfills. So of the 17 sites impacting on surface water bodies, the largest group is the food and drink sector. And of the 27 sites impacting on groundwater bodies, it's mainly due to the closed municipal landfills, the chemical, surface coating and timber treatment sectors. They're located throughout the country, and some sites are impacting on both surface and groundwater bodies. So the enforcement strategy is to drive and prioritise enforcement at these sites so that the cause of the pressure is identified and a plan is put in place to rectify it by a specified time frame. We're doing this by ongoing assessment of data and communication with the licensees in order to establish the status of key infrastructure on site, mainly the drainage networks and tank and pipeline assessments. So we're carrying out site inspections, looking at this key infrastructure, looking at all the discharges from the sites, and we're looking at the receiving waters upstream and downstream. There's ongoing information exchange with the catchments team, the groundwater teams, so that they have the information as we get it. It's the most up-to-date information. And we're connecting with LawPro at some sites. We are also following up on the LawPro reports that are produced. So for this year, our main objective is to ensure that corrective action plans to rectify the issue are identified within a specified time frame, and to obtain evidence that progress is being made in this. So the main pressures for surface water are nutrients, mainly from inadequate effluent treatment, insufficient assimilative capacity at the main discharge point, old drainage networks that are damaged and leaking, they've missed connections. In general, there's poor information available on them. Poor hard-standing areas on site where the yards aren't sealed, and so their contamination is leaching down into the ground. And there's misconnections between the clean and dirty yard areas. There have also been spillages which have resulted in fish kills. And the actions that have been taken to date include wastewater treatment plant upgrades, the primary discharges have been moved and licenses have been reviewed. Drainage upgrade programs are ongoing over 3 and 5 year periods, and there is integrity testing of underground pipework. The full drainage network needs to be mapped on all of these sites, and there needs to be full segregation of clean and yard dirty areas, and yards are also being resurfaced. With the groundwater pressures, they're due to significant ground and groundwater contamination, with concentrations more than 2 orders of magnitude above the groundwater threshold value, and plumes migrating off-site. The main contaminants at these sites are PCE, TCE, trichloroethylene and breakdown products, some other organics, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, total petroleum hydrocarbons, hexavalent chromium, and then ammonia and chloride from the landfills. These are long-term contaminated land projects, and the actions that are being taken at them is phased site investigation with the development of conceptual site models, etc. The plumes need to be delineated at these sites so that the risks associated with them can be assessed, and remediation plans developed then. They should all be done in accordance with the EPA Contaminated Land Guidance, which is available on the EPA website. So we need to establish what stage the remediation and the site investigation is at each of these sites. And in relation to monitoring, there is monitoring being carried out at most of these sites, but for what purpose? Do the monitoring results show if the remedial works were effective? Do the monitoring results show if there's a trend? Is there an upward or a downward trend? Licensees need to ensure that the monitoring reports are showing whether the contamination is attenuating as expected, and is the contamination expected to when is the contamination expected to reach acceptable levels, and what are the acceptable levels, which should have been defined in a detailed quantitative risk assessment, and are they on schedule? So to sum up, the main outcome is that licensed sites are no longer a significant pressure, but interim outcomes are to get corrective action plans established and identified, and timeframes this year to ensure that progress in implementing the corrective action plans is demonstrated, and in the slightly longer term to have surface water significant pressure sites that are not landfills removed by 2027. Some of the progress that has happened, 2 additional groundwater sites have been added in 2020. However, remediation has either been completed, is ongoing or planned at most of these sites. However, most of them will not meet the 2027 objective. A number of licensed sites were removed last year, and 1 was added, and there are no single pressure sites to surface water bodies. However, we're finding issues of concern at each site visit, mainly in relation to inadequate process and non-process wastewater treatment, and then the old and damaged drainage networks that are poorly maintained. Licensees need to make sure that they're using standard lab methods and procedures, and that the monitoring reports are telling them how they are progressing. So basically, licensees need to take more responsibility for what they're discharging from their sites. They need to know what their monitoring data means, and they need to act when their monitoring results indicate a potential issue. It's a dynamic situation, so while some licensees might be compliant with their license and may be removed as a significant pressure, ongoing vigilance will be required to ensure that the site continues to be appropriately managed to prevent contamination of adjacent waters. Where licensees do not fix the issue, we will escalate enforcement. And with that, I'll hand over to Jim.
Thank you very much, Becky. And I'll keep going on the urban wastewater discharge side of it. As Ted indicated earlier, there's over 1,000 authorised sites that operate under either a licence or a certificate from the EPA. And there are widespread non-compliance issues with those. But I guess in any sphere like that, it's important to focus on where the greatest achievements can be got. So we know from the characterisation work that 208 water bodies are impacted by wastewater discharges. That equates to 170 agglomerations. Now that awkward word means, as Ted outlined, there's a mixture of piping networks, pumping stations, and actual treatment plants themselves. So, you know, you can have a number of impacts from within the same network, a pumping station further back up the network, the treatment plant itself then at the end. So it's about 170 agglomerations represent impacts on those 208 bodies. And they are then at risk of not meeting their environmental objectives, as we heard earlier. And significant investment is going to be required, as we've heard, over many years to deal with this risk. So that's the key aspect to it. And it's a question of focusing our efforts and in turn influencing Irish Water's efforts to target it at where the benefits are going to be greatest. So we've been doing this work for about 5 years now. And at that stage, we focused on 59 areas where wastewater discharges was the primary pressure, so the main issue. In many of the cases, there are multi-issues. So agriculture could be an issue, forestry could be an issue, wastewater discharges could be an issue. But it's possible to zone out some of those other ones and see where wastewater discharges is the dominant issue, if I call it that. And in fairness, the trend on that, as I say, we started in 2017. There was 59 areas where it was a single pressure or the dominant pressure, and that's been going down over the years. 42 last year, and we're now, from the latest listing that we've just come out with in the last couple of weeks, we're down to 37 areas where wastewater represents the primary pressure on the water body. Now, these are spread around the country. This map is from our website. All this information is available on our website. And it's important that we see a corrective action plan in place and a program in place and achievements brought to bear on these areas. There are other programs in place. Treatment works are being upgraded currently at 3 areas, or were upgraded at 3 areas, and we're assessing the impact of that to see can we now remove it as a primary pressure? Has it had the effect that we want to have? It's important to monitor the outcome of the investment that's done to ensure that it actually achieves what it sets out to. There are improvements underway at a number of other sites, at 7, and that leaves at 27, which we're calling on Irish Water to work on plans, put in place a corrective action plan, get a timeline for it, get it into RC3, make sure it's in RC4, all those types of things. We want to see everything done to focus on these priority areas. And it can work. I mean, I want to say that the results of some of the investments that have been carried out is clear to see. We have a case, a study here from the wastewater report, which we publish every year, that shows a plant in, a Donegal convoy was being serviced by a plant over 50 years old, overloaded, not working, couldn't adequately treat the wastewater for the population which it served, and having a negative impact on the water quality locally, the River Deal there. So we highlighted that as a priority area and focused action on it, used our enforcement tools, compliance investigations, whatever you will, to get work done on it. And there was a major upgrade carried out in 2018, and the wastewater discharges are now being treated to a much higher standard than heretofore. And wastewater is no longer a significant pressure on that water body, and Convoy has been removed from the list of priority sites. So that's what we want to see, and it can work. It requires, investment. I think in this case, Convoy was part of a bundle of 4 plans that were done in the area, and the total cost was 20 million, I think, in that order. So, it doesn't come cheap, but it's important that it's targeted on the right area. The River Deal is to the left of the picture there, and is now in a much better state than it was heretofore before the upgrades. And in terms of the effluent quality, it's clear to see. Once it's in place, you have to operate the plant right and maintain it and comply with it. So you see the drop-off. The chart there shows the BOD, which is the oxygen, a demand placed on the water body from the receiving discharge. So from a non-compliance situation to the treatment plant upgrade there and right down to practically naught, once it's operated right and maintained. And that's important. Ted outlined that to maintain the assets that are there as well. You have to operate them right. So that shows that it can be done. Now, I guess to conclude, we're really about targeting resources at these priority areas to ensure the improvements are brought to bear, and that they're done so in the areas where it has the greatest environmental benefit from our perspective. We use every avenue we can to highlight the areas. Irish Water know about them, the public know about them. We highlight them in the national reports, in the press, in media. We ask for and receive regular updates from Irish Water in respect of progress in each of the priority areas which are there. So we keep on top of it and we deal with it in a national way in that sense. Is it a carrot? Is it a stick? We have both, I suppose, open to us. But I have to say that where progress isn't made, you can only call for something for so long. You call and you call, and you call again next year. And it's at some stage we have to stand for what we believe in, I guess, in that sense. So we do consider further action where we don't have a clear corrective action plan in place. And we know it takes time, but it needs to be on plans and it needs to be on a concrete pathway and see it. So with regard to that, where say progress isn't being made as we consider it, we're not afraid to take action. So at the moment there are 5 cases going through the courts for plants where we consider they represent a significant pressure on the water quality, but where there aren't plans in place and no prospective plans in place, despite us calling for a number of years. So that's an important strand and part of the enforcement strategy that we have as well. It's important. I mean, there's a fairly complex web of strategy documents and policy plans and so on, and funding streams. Ted outlined some of them there in his talk. It's important that all of those funding sources are maximised and used. Ted mentioned the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, an EU funding programme. There was funding announced there recently for upgrades at 12 plants, I think, and we were pleased to see that 9 of those 12 represented a significant pressure on water quality. So that's good to see that that's an extra funding stream that was there, it's used, and it's being deployed in the right area. So to conclude, and with that in mind, we see the next capital investment plan runs for 2025 to 2029. So that's going through a planning kind of a process now. We expect, really, to be number 1 on the list, Ted. Everyone else will expect to be number 1 on it as well. But we expect the work that we do and the submissions that we make and the priority areas that we identify to be included in the next investment plan so that the significant pressures can be tackled. And thanks very much.